We are lunatics. If you say you're going to realtor conventions and meetups, my friend, no realtor learns how to be an investor by being a realtor. Realtors, do you agree with this? Do not hang out with realtors unless...
My name is Drew, I'm 18 years old, and I'm just getting in real estate, and I want to know the number one thing I can implement to really get into your position.
I don't know.
You may need answers.
When you say your position, what do you mean specifically? Is it just like, wow, you have money and you have a really stupid beard? Like, what is it?
So I'm actually, like I said, I'm just getting into real estate, and right now I'm working on closing my first deal, and I'm really just trying to soak up and learn as much as I can from all these realtor events I've been trying to go to, especially one right now, and really get in talks with people who know what they're doing. What can I do?
Okay, so the other day I was talking to a lady. She came on, asked me a question on this live free training I was doing on YouTube. And she had an accent. And she says, I go, where are you from? She says, I'm from Brazil. What do they speak in Brazil? Portuguese. I said, how did you learn Portuguese? She says, I was born in Brazil. I'm like, that's not why you know Portuguese. You know Portuguese because why? Because you are in the atmosphere of other people. So how have I learned how? Rob Abasolo is probably my favorite YouTuber. I've said this all the time, over and over and over. I want to be a better YouTuber, a better entertainer, a better writer. I want to be a better investor. I watch, I hang out with, and I make sure I'm in his proximity. I want to make sure that I know how to comp. I want to build my co-living business. I'm going to hang out with them, spend as much time with them as I possibly can. That's pretty obvious advice. You're doing a good job of it, but you said something there that made me go, ooh. If you say you're going to realtor conventions and meetups, my friend, no realtor learns how to be an investor by being a realtor. Realtors, do you agree with this? Do not hang out with realtors unless they're in rooms like this. Okay, realtors come here to say, how can I compound outside of being a real estate agent? But if you're going to real estate agent meetups, what are they primarily teaching you?
How to list, how to find listings.
How to find listings, which is the 9-to-5 job of real estate business. Okay, they're not investors. It sounds like you want to be an investor, so spend less time with agents, more time with unicorn agents. Where are my unicorn agents? Raise your hands. Unicorn agent means I understand creative finance, I understand off market, I understand investing, I understand taxes, and if I don't, I'm going to be in the room that teaches me those things. So that's the first thing I would do. Second thing I would do is 18, I would join somebody's team as fast as possible. Subto Drew, Louver, do you guys have openings on your team at all?
We got 5 meetups a month for free.
Okay, so Subto Drew is somebody that I would get to know right here. He's one of the gentlemen that's helping run. You can see him. He's running around. He's hustling. He's one of the most important people in all of Houston. I would make sure I talk to him and say, can I join your team? Can I hang out with you? Can I bring value to you? He helps so many people get their first deal. It's ridiculous. Shout out to you, 18 years old. Give it up for the 18-year-old. If you want to be, here's a weird answer. I'd say more people in this audience do not want to be like me, Jamil, or Rob. We are lunatics. Like, we work so hard. We're on a mission. We're hell-bent on accomplishing things that most people wouldn't even dream of. And I would say most people are like, I'm good with 1% of what you guys have done. And so you got to kind of carve out what you really want. And at 18 years old, dude, I didn't know what I wanted until I was 25. You know, and maybe I didn't even know what I wanted until I was 42, like maybe 6 months ago. I just know I work like a dog all day long. I love it so much. What's up, little homie? Rachel, what do we got?
Okay, what's the biggest mistake new investors make when struggling with creative deals?
With creative deals? The same mistakes they make on any deal. I want everybody to understand this. Creative finance does not have any more risk than a traditional deal. Period, end of story. It actually has a lot less. For example, if I go take over a sub-2 deal and I fail at that sub-2 deal, the person who let me take over the mortgage, their credit is hurt, but is my credit hurt? Yes or no? So I actually have a lot less risk. I don't ever want that situation to happen, but creative finance deals, I have way less at risk than a traditional deal. You never want to default on anything, but if I default on a traditional loan that I pulled my credit, there's way worse situations. Does that make sense? The worst thing that people do, I'm going to give one. I want Rob and Jamil to give one as well. Yeah. The first one is they don't actually underwrite the deal and they just go buy stuff because they have FOMO that everybody else is doing deals, and they deploy capital and time on something they did not underwrite and did not have anybody else underwrite on top of it. Rob?
Several mistakes. One, I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a coach like Pace. I knew Pace. He comes into play a little bit into my first creative deal that I ever did. But the second really big problem that I had is I didn't have a transaction coordinator. And so I had a title company that did creative deals that was recommended to me, but I didn't actually have someone that was quarterbacking all the paperwork for me. I knew Pace. He had taught me some stuff. I watched his channel. I kind of like knew enough to be dangerous, or so I thought. So I get into this like $700,000 deal. It was a good deal. I go to the closing table and I'm like, all right, I just got to sign. It's good to go. Like a couple clauses, like Pace said. And none of it was the same. Nothing on the contract was it. So I had to call Pace and I was like, Pace, holy shit, man, I'm at the closing table and I don't know what I'm doing. This clause says the, not a. And he's like, calm down. We're gonna get this taken care of. Email Molly, call Molly. We get on the phone. Molly coordinates with the closing company and she's like, oh, hey, yeah, that clause should say this. Boom, 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 boom. And just like that, I closed the deal in the next hour. But I could not have done that without a coach or without a TC to have my back during that deal. So walking into a deal a little too blindly was definitely my biggest mistake as a creative investor.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Pace.
Thank you, Rob.
Appreciate you.
Love that. Jamillionaire?
Oh my God. Okay, so I did creative deals a lot in Canada, and I would say the biggest mistake that I made was I didn't plan for the worst. I didn't have an idea what I would do if things didn't go the way I planned. So I had assigned a bunch of deals to one specific buyer, and this person ended up not fulfilling their part of the bargain. They didn't make the payments. The properties all went into foreclosure, and I didn't have the capital or the wherewithal to be able to handle those situations. So all those people ended up hating me because their credit got destroyed and it got bombed. And this was, back in 2008. So it was really, really tough. I would say if you're gonna do these deals, when you do these deals, make sure you plan. Like, hey, what's my backup plan if this thing doesn't work out? What's my backup plan if my buyer doesn't work out? What's my backup plan if my wrap buyer doesn't work out? Or do I have the wherewithal? Is my financial partner willing to come up to the table and help me debt service this until we bring in another situation? Plan for the worst, knowing that it's a 1 in 100 chance that that's gonna happen. But just plan for it. That way, if a rainy day does come, you got it covered. You got to figure it out. You never want to be on the other side of somebody being hurt because you didn't plan for it. That's all.
I've been wholesaling for a while now. I did a lot of land nationwide, and I'm just switching to wholesaling in Houston. And I'm finding that I'm having a hard time finding buyers. I go on Facebook into networking groups. I'm looking at the emails, and they're not real buyers. I'm trying to find buyers who's doing 11, 12 deals a year and add as much value as I can. I'm good at acquisitions, but I'm just struggling on the dispositions part.
Okay, cool.
Let me. I got to introduce you, right?
Okay.
That's why I'm here.
Let me tell you about who's going to answer this question. I immediately, as you start talking, I go, Jamil. This man sold my first 500 deals for me. I never had to talk to a buyer for 500 plus deals. He has made me so much money by taking the disposition off my plate. I would suggest to you, actually, just listen to whatever the heck this guy says. He had the largest disposition company in the country, 160 cities, franchises all over the place. They were doing 3,000 dispositions a month. And then he just sold that company about 6 months ago. Give it up for Jamil Damji.
Okay. So buyers, right? You said something in there that was interesting to me. You said that they're not real because you're probably talking to other wholesalers on Facebook groups. Is that correct? Okay. So I want to change a perspective that I just want to open that up for a second, because of the deals that Pace was just talking about, the 500 that I did with Pace, do you know how many of those went through another wholesaler before it went to a buyer? Probably about 75% of them. And so before you close your mind to the fact that you might be able to do a JV with another wholesaler, let them see what they've got. Let them show you what they've got. But be open and transparent with them. Say, look, I don't have a problem with you shopping my deal, but I want to know that you're shopping my deal, first of all. I want you to ask me my permission. And then second of all, what are you going to shop it at? I don't want you to be sending this out at like some crazy numbers, because it's going to get back to me if you do. So have an open dialogue with other wholesalers, because other wholesalers are going to be a great opportunity for you to disposition deals. Don't close them off. Daisy chains is whatever you want to call them. I've made millions of dollars on daisy chains. There's nothing wrong with them. They're great. You just have to make sure you're working with good, honest people. Okay? Second, the tax records. I know they're a pain in the to go through, but your tax record is by far the number one place to find buyers. Now, what is a tax? Where do you find a tax record? Every city, every county has a different tax record, has a different county recorder. Whatever the Houston County recorder is, go to that website and it'll show you the cash transactions. These are people that have bought in either cash or they have bought in hard money. The third place that you can find a buyer is go to the MLS. Go to the MLS and look at all of the brand new listings that look like they're flip properties. Okay, they've been newly renovated, they got a new kitchen, they got new flooring, they got paint, staging, all the things. You'll know that it's not somebody's renovated home when you get to the master bedroom and there's no clothes in the closet. Now you know you've got a flip. Okay, now you're gonna take the address of that property and you're gonna find out who owns that property. And then you're going to go to Open Corporates, because it's going to be an LLC, and you're going to find out the managing member's name, and then go to truepeoplesearch.com and get their phone number. Now, why is it so hard to find buyers? Because what I just said takes 6 steps, right? And most wholesalers are too lazy to do 1 step. Truth. So there are platforms out there like InvestorBase. You can go to InvestorBase. It's a great website. These guys, it's a paid service though. You're gonna pay them a couple $100 a month, and they will do all of that work for you. You put in an address and it'll give you the names and phone numbers and emails of the top 100 buyers in a quarter mile of where that property is. Those 4 things I just told you right now should make you $1 million.
Governor Greg Abbott declared a state of emergency to help Texans prepare for this weekend's Arctic blast.
If you can stay off the roads, you really should this weekend.
Right now, I'm just hearing that the Dallas venue is so fearful of the storm that's coming. It's the storm of the century, ice storm, everything else. That the Dallas venue, we have 2,000 people. Is it, how many people?
I think it is up over 2,000.
It's close to 2,000 RSVPs. It was gonna be our biggest event of the tour. The venue is asking us to cancel because it's not safe. In fact, they're gonna cancel on us. And Tanya Waymeyer has worked her 6 months on this to put this all together. We got sponsorships, we got all sorts of things, and everything's gonna be canceled. These are those moments in your life where you gotta like make a really tough decision. Because it's not just like, do we wanna just hang around in Dallas for 3 days or hang around in the cold for 3 days? Or is it better if we're gonna cancel Austin, Dallas? Is it?
It's also just not safe for people to drive.
It's not safe for us to drive a 40-foot bus, right? And it could end up being nothing, and it also could end up being the worst storm, which is what they're saying in a long time. So is the right thing to do to go here and go to San Antonio? San Antonio is gonna be cold?
San Antonio's will be fine until like literally the next morning overnight. So we're fine tonight and tomorrow.
I think what we do is since the heavy duty storm comes in on Austin, and it's literally Austin is like the eye of the storm, it's the worst part. I think we have to cancel Austin, otherwise we're going to cause damage to people, and we're asking people basically to be on the road in a dangerous storm. It's just stupid and it's irresponsible, right? So I think we do that, and what we do is we send a message to everybody in Austin and we send a message to everybody in Dallas, and we go, hey, we are going to do San Antonio still, and we are also going to come back to Dallas now on May 3rd, Sunday. So either A, come and hang out with us in San Antonio if you're in Austin and you want to come to the meetup, or B, wait until we're up in Dallas on May 3rd, but we're canceling both Austin and Dallas because of the storm. It's not safe. It's a bad idea.